Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another round Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. Now I'm gonna get this one right underway. There's 4 cards to talk about, so without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, first off, we got this next gen card taking place at the Indigo 2, Greenwich, London. It's actually taking place today. So by the time you guys watch this, it should have started, and I believe it's going to be finishing at about 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock tonight. I've looked at the undercard. Look, it's a bunch of prospects against, journeymen, journeywomen. So we're not even going to talk about that. We're literally going to go straight to the chief support, which is Janaid Boston versus Belal Fawaz. And I can't give any kind of comprehensive breakdown of how I think this one's going to go. I've never seen Belal Fawaz fight. I had a quick look at the box rec to kind of see who he's fought. I don't recognize any of the names off the top of my head. Maybe if I deep dived into one or two, I might see a name. Oh, okay, they fought this person, who fought that person. But ultimately, I think he's got 2 losses on his record, and he's about to get a 3rd one. And it's probably going to be by way of stoppage in and around the middle rounds. I'm going off nothing but just, what I think the trajectory is at this point for Janaid Boston. He's had some tougher fights previously. I don't know if this is supposed to be one of the tough ones, but I'm going with him to win just because I don't think you're setting him up to lose on a next gen card at this point in time. Moving to the main event now, this one I do have a bit more knowledge of this. So you've got George Lidard versus Derek Osaze. Now, Derek in his last fight out had a bit of a torrid 2nd round with Denzel Bentley. Denzel Too Sharp Bentley. Happy belated birthday, by the way, if you're watching, Denz. With that though, but in that very 1st round, Derek Osaze had some very good, he had some good moments. I think I even had him winning that 1st round just on the punch placement, the way he was setting up his shots. So, he's a very tidy boxer. He's got a bit of experience, even though he hasn't had many pro fights. He's got enough of a, sort of an experience pool whereby it's, there is a theory that he may just have a bit too much knowledge in the tank for George Lidard. Now, George Lidard is 10-0, 6 KO, 60% KO ratio, so he's got some power. If you talk about the people he's stopping, it ultimately the majority of them ain't necessarily like the greatest, but they have been pretty competitive, or they've been looked competitive on paper, I maybe should say. Look, this fight I think is going to come down to how it starts. If Derek Osaze can establish a rhythm without taking too many chances and without taking too much unnecessary damage or risks in the first 2 to 3 rounds, then I definitely think he grabs a strong foothold in this fight and makes it extremely competitive and very, very close, especially down the stretch. But if George Lidard can dictate the pace and the tempo from that 1st round and establish everything on his timing and his trajectory, that basically will spell a very bad situation for Derek Osaze. I don't know which way I'm leaning on this one. Osaze, I feel, has got the slightly better skills, but I think that the momentum, the tenacity, and the punch power most certainly is with George Lidard. I think because this will be Lidard's 2nd headliner in a row, he would have got used to being able to headline. The Indigo 2 isn't much different from the York Hall in terms of the size of it, of the amount of capacity you put in there for a boxing fight, and I guess the atmosphere at York Hall can be a little more vociferous. So I'm maybe against. I'm gonna go with George Lidard to win the fight. I'm gonna go with him to win the fight via mid to late round stoppage. Initially I was thinking maybe he might get points decision, but I can't trust Asaze not to take an unnecessary risk, especially early on, which changes the tide of the fight. And I think just because of that, Lidard may, he may end up getting that stoppage towards the end. So it's either going to be a very late stoppage or it's going to be a unanimous points decision. That's my prediction for that. Alright, so we're moving over to the first card taking place on Saturday at the OVO Arena in Wembley, which is headlined by Adam Azim and Sergey Lipinets. Since Vidal Riley and Isaac Chamberlain ended up off of this card, I didn't really have much interest in it, if I'm honest. Callum Simpson has recently been added onto it, so has Scott Forrest. You had Jamie TKV taking on Michael Webster. I think that was the only decent, somewhat competitive fight that was still on the card from the original lineup. Ultimately, I kind of think that Michael Webster's got, he's got decent fundamentals, nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. But considering that I think TKV is just a horrible opponent for him, he's gonna get in close, he's gonna lean on him, he's gonna push him back, he's gonna throw big shots from the inside, the outside, just gonna be nasty forearms, create distance, create separation. I just see Michael Webster unfortunately getting knocked out, and I expect him to be knocked out inside the first 5 rounds of the contest. Moving on to the main event, look, Sergey Lipinets, he's got 3 losses on his record, 1 to Mikey Garcia, 1 to Jaron Ennis, and the other one to Michel Rivera. But he is the quintessential PBC guy, the guy that's not the main guy, but the person that you fatten up and you give them, a lot of good quality opponents for them, as in they're tailored. Those opponents are tailored to them and tailored to their style. You get them to a level whereby they become a viable opponent for the person that you're trying to build and make into your superstar. PBC way, he was one of those guys essentially. Campaigned up at 147 for a period of time, has come back down to 140, and I think ultimately at his age now, that's where the problem is going to be. The fact that he is now, he was too small for 147, but having campaigned there for as long as he did, coming back down to 140 for the last couple of fights, it will take a little bit out of him from his resistance and his endurance. Most people will feel that he got a bit of a gift decision against Robbie Davis Jr. in his previous bout. Adam Azim, I think at this point, too quick, good reflexes, is on a roll, got a bit of momentum. Lipinets has got very good experience, might be able to old man him out of his position for maybe the first 3 to 4 rounds, but Azim will catch him with something, because Lipinets does like to trade, especially when he feels like he's had a bit of success and he feels that his power will take him through the fight. So yeah, I think in that moment of trying to trade and getting a bit too froggy, getting a bit too greedy, he's going to get caught by Azim. And I predict that by the 7th round, the fight will be over. It will probably be over before then, if I'm honest. Maybe round 5 or 6, he just gets caught with something, can't recover, and then gets taken out. But yeah, I see it. Unless he can old man his way through the first half of the fight and then just try to remain competitive on the second half, I do see the fight ending in the first 7 rounds. I'm gonna leave it there. Right, so moving on to the main card of the weekend, which everyone will probably be tuning into in terms of boxing. You've got David Benavidez versus David Morrell Jr. Now on the undercard, pretty decent names on there. But you've got Isaac Cruz versus Angel Fierro in the third from Top Fight. Now this is taking place at 140, or a catch weight in between sort of 136 and 140, I would say. Fierro is the slightly taller of the two by about 3.5 inches, I believe. Isaac Cruz is obviously the shorter, stumpier guy, so he's going to have to try to work his way onto the inside to have success. Fierro, I believe, will try to keep him slightly on the outside of range, keep him at the end of his jab and keep him at the end of his 1-2, but eventually the you know, sort of that Mexican gene that he has, I feel will take over, and both will just essentially try to slug and trade. In that moment, I believe that Isaac Cruz will have a slight advantage, especially being more comfortable on the inside and being capable to, you know, basically explode into shots. And I feel like he's going to throw his entire body weight into every single shot that he does connect with. Now both guys have got very similar KO ratios. I think they both got 18 KOs in their careers, so you know, both guys can punch, but I guess Cruz has been fighting at a slightly better level than Fierro. Actually, yeah, I'll say slightly, I won't disrespect too much. So yeah, I think in the second half of the fight, I can see Cruz trying to push Fierro back, trying to basically bully, bulldoze, grind down, attritional. Probably he will jump in with a sweeping right hook, catch Fierro unawares, probably hurt him, stagger him, jump in with a flurry and make the ref step in, whether Fierro goes down or not to the canvas. I see the referee stopping the fight, but I see him stopping the fight around about the 8th or the 9th round. Moving on to the chief support, you've got Brandon Figueroa versus Stephen Fulton. Now this is a rematch from their fight that took place at 122. I believe at that point it was a unification bout, which is how Stephen Fulton ended up getting 2 belts and then fighting Naoya Inoue afterwards. Brandon Figueroa definitely has acclimatized and benefited moving up to 126. He's actually a naturally bigger person than Fulton. Fulton actually did well at 122. Problem is, he was out of the ring so long and he was just at that stage where it was getting really difficult to make that weight, but he's also in that uncomfortable position where he's a bit too small for 126. That also notwithstanding the fact that he has no real punching power. Brandon Figueroa, I believe, is not on the level of Stephen Fulton when it comes to technical abilities and just ring IQ and ring craft, but his aggression, his pace, his energy and his power, especially up at this higher weight, I think is going to ultimately be too much for Fulton, especially considering that he does have a bit of that Philly gene where he likes to stay on the inside and get comfortable and try to slip and ride and roll shots. And I think because of that particular situation, he's going to stay on the inside too long, maybe even switch off for a moment, get caught with something which is going to change the tide of the fight. Because as I say, if he was to box from the outside and just remain in that vein, he would win the fight very comfortably. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to try to exchange and show that he's got heart and he's got the dog in him and all of that sort of stuff. But I believe in doing that, he's going to hand the fight over to Brandon Figueroa. And I do think that especially as in his first fight up at 126, he ended up on the canvas. I think he will end up on the canvas again, and I think he'll stay there. So I am predicting Brandon Figueroa to win, and it should be in and around a similar time as the previous bout that I gave. So I'm thinking between rounds 8 to 9 again. All right, moving on to the main event now. Now I've recorded this video and the segment just before multiple times now. The battery on my mic died, so I'm not going to be going through the entire thing as I did before. So the truncated version of what I previously said is David Benavidez and David Morrell. This fight ultimately comes down to who can start the fight the best. It also comes down to can either person hurt the other person early. Now, what I mean by that is I expect wholeheartedly that in the first few rounds specifically, David Benavidez is going to be up on the scorecards, primarily because he throws more punches normally than David Morrell does. He's a lot more aggressive, and even if the punches aren't landing, the judges are going to look and see the aggressive activity, and it's going to, you know, look like he's forcing the pace and winning the fight. The only way that David Morrell can circumvent that is if the punches that he's throwing are having a visible impact and reaction to David Benavidez, thereby making the judges understand that no, he's actually in control of these rounds. If you look at the two of them and their previous opponents, David Benavidez was unable to stay in character against Alexander Gvozdyk, especially after sort of round 5 or round 6. And then the whole back half of that fight to me was pretty much Alexander Gvozdyk. Whereas in the fight between Kalajic and Morrell, even though Morrell didn't look great in that fight, he did stay in character. The same things that he does in his previous fights, he was able to do in that one. But Radavalle, because him being a mover, meant Morrell had to try to find him, which is not, you know, is not really something he has to work on as much as a pro compared to in his amateur days. And in Benavidez, he had someone that was, you know, moving laterally, creating distance, not really throwing everything into the shots and trying to stay out of the way and make him have to sort of chase down, which is easier for him to do with the smaller guys, but not with someone, you know, the same size that he is at. So I think the southpaw angles from Morrell is going to cause Benavidez some issues, especially when he starts squaring up, as he quite frequently does do. And I think the way that the fight ultimately is going to play out is that David Benavidez is going to be sort of racking up the early rounds, good activity, good aggression. He'll be landing some shots, and I think that Morrell will not be winning the rounds, but he's going to be aiming to stay in those rounds and basically work enough that he makes David work, and to hope that he can take the back half of the fight while trying to probably dig to the body, to try to slow down the legs, to, you know, to sort of drain the gas tank down a little bit and try to take the fight over in the second half. I believe that David Morrell's fight, his power will carry later into the fight a lot better than David Benavidez will. I know that, well, I say that, but Benavidez does have Memo Heredia back in his corner. So if you know, you know. I won't be surprised if the energy does carry on throughout the entire fight. But David Morrell ultimately knows that he can't win this fight on points. David Benavidez is the A side. He's the PBC guy. He's the more aggressive guy. Normally, he's the more high volume guy. So every optic is going to look like it's him, unless he's either been dropped multiple times or badly stunned multiple times in several rounds. And I think David Morrell knows that he can't allow this fight to go to the scorecards, because he is the away guy in the situation. And while I do think he can comprehensively outbox David Benavidez, I also, again, just the activity and the volume from Benavidez, I think, is what the judges will look at specifically. So because of that, Morrell can't let it go to the scorecards, and I don't think he plans to. So my overall assumption and how this fight plays out is that Benavidez is going to be winning those early rounds, but Morrell is going to be doing enough work to invest into the body, drain that gas tank, aim to take take the tires off of the car, you know, take the air out of the tires, as they like to say. And I think he sort of goes for it later on in the fight, and I think he does hurt Benavidez probably on more than one occasion towards the back end of the fight. And between sort of, I guess, rounds 10 and 11, I can see a scenario where either Benavidez maybe, you know, touches the canvas on an occasion, or he gets caught and wobbled by something, as we do know that Morrell can carry his power late. A lot of people talk about the fact that Morrell has only, you know, they're like, oh, he's only gone 12 round distance twice. Well, no, actually he's been in the 12th round 3 times in his career, and Benavidez has actually only been in there 5 times, so he's only been there twice, 2 times more. And I would say that comparatively, David's 11 fights to Morrell's 11 fights to Benavidez's 29 fights. The level of competition outside of maybe Caleb Plant, Demetrius Andrade and Alexander Gvozdyk are pretty comparable, and then even Gvozdyk is kind of cancelled out a little bit by Kalajdzic, even though obviously Gvozdyk was former world champion. I think that, yeah, they pretty much boxed a similar level of opposition. So with the 137 and 2 or 135 and 2 in the amateur bouts for David Morrell, I think he's gotten more than enough experience from prior to make this one count. I do think he stops Benavidez. I think he stops him late. For some reason, Benavidez is listed at 6'2" and Morrell's listed at 6'1", but every time I see them, Morrell, his forehead is above David's, not including the hair. His shoulders are above David's. He looks like the taller guy. He's definitely got the bigger, sort of wider setback and frame. I think his power carries a lot better at 175 than Benavidez's does. So yeah, I do think that, knowing that he can't let this go to the scorecards, David Morrell will find the necessary shots to hurt David Benavidez, and I do think he takes him out late, rounds 10 to 11. And last but not least, Sunday, Claressa Shields versus Danielle Perkins. Short answer, Claressa Shields wins, probably unanimous decision, and then whatever she chooses to do next, she chooses to do. Guys, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. I am interested to hear if anyone disagrees with me, why they disagree, and who you think is going to win the fights that I've spoken about. Any others you want, put down in the comments. I'll try and respond to you there as well. But for right now, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. And that's Basis Picks, locked.